Well, welcome again. We have launched a second question during this short coffee break. The question was, how interested would you be in contributing data to the open data repository? And the answers, most of the answers have gone from 3 to 5, being 1 less interested and 5 very interested. So most of the audience could be interested in contributing to this share and open data repository. Thank you very much, and we are going to move on with the next presentations. Hilda, I see you there, so I give you the floor again. Thank you.
We can't hear you, Hilda.
So, hello again. Sorry that I messed up with the technology. I hope that you are ready for another invigorating session here. We have two topics, and I would like to welcome the speakers. And I will introduce the two first speakers because they are in this twin presentation setup, and then wait with you, Sina, and Andrea to immediately before your presentations. So the first topic here is on educational guidelines, both from the TInnGO project and from the DIAMOND, and it's with Lazarus Tamparsis from the TInnGO project and with Rafa Saleh from the DIAMOND project. And Lazarus is a civil engineer and regional development consultant. He has been involved in civil engineering projects, designing highways, drainage, and infrastructure projects. And for the past 2 years, he has been involved in deliverable sustainable urban mobility plans, SUMS, for different municipalities around Greece. And he also takes part in several studies related to the transport field and is now part of the TInnGO project. And Rafa Saleh, who you know from the start of this conference, is professor at Edinburgh Napier University, professor of transport engineering, and the chair of the International Committee of the Travel Demand Management, which is hosting this symposium. She is a member of the Scientific Committee of International Symposium of Transportation Reliability, and the author and co-author of over 150 publications in all types of national, international journals and conferences. Rafa is a chartered engineer with over 30 years experience in teaching, research, and practice. And the main focus of her research interest includes travel demand management, modeling travel behavior, accident analysis, and investigations of transport and the environment, and traffic engineering. And she is also currently a visiting professor in Riyadh. Welcome to both of you, and I will give the word to Lazarus, who is the first speaker. Please, Lazarus, you have 10 minutes. Are you with us?
Okay, thank you, Hilda. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen now.
Just share your screen. Yeah.
Okay, hello everyone. So we're going to talk about the educational guidelines. We have developed a training material in the context of TInnGO. So this presentation contains an overview of this material. I'm going to introduce you to the modules and what they contain, and also in the final part, we're going to see together some interactive examples from the material. Now, the purpose of this material was to develop a one-stop shop material that related to gender and diversity in smart mobility. What we've done is we've summarized the current status in smart mobility. We also present the main challenges and barriers. We highlight best practices, case studies, and examples in order for the reader to gain a deeper understanding. We also demonstrate tools to promote gender and diversity in the transport field. And we conclude with recommendations and suggestions depending on the content of the module, of each module. The material aims policymakers, employees, and employers in the transport sector. The material is quite interactive with graphs and quiz to be more engaging for the reader. Now, the modules are the ones seen in this slide. We've got an introductory part. We've got a gender smart mobility module. The next module is on methods and tools to measure gender issues around intersectional analysis. We've got a module on responsible research, on employment, on education, a module on evaluation methods, and a module on the GADAPs. So let's go through them. So the first, the introductory part, has to do with the project scopes and its components. So we take a look at our umbrella, the observatory. We've got links to the website, to the data collections, the data repository, to the open innovation platform where one can see design ideas, discussions, initiatives, etc. We also introduce the reader to concepts such as gender, diversity, and smart mobility. And we also display information on the hubs, the national hubs, who contributed to TInnGO and in what way, so one can get a general idea on these issues. Now, if we want to delve a bit deeper, going into more detail, the next module, Gender Smart Mobility module, presents concepts of gender smart mobility in a more detailed way. Then we explain what is gender and diversity mainstreaming and how TInnGO approaches gender and diversity dimensions through, for example, inclusive language or gender scripts. One can find information on mobility patterns by gender. We have also included indicators of gender smart mobility and the requirements. And there's also a quiz throughout the module to help the readers deepen their knowledge and understanding. Now, going through the third module, methods to measure gender issues around intersectional analysis, we explain what intersectional analysis is, and we present a range of various methods to measure these issues. And we've got examples, case studies, and best practices for each one of the methods. And if the reader wants to delve deeper in these, we also have provided links on different equality tools, certain guides and PDF forms. And we concluded the module with further suggestions to enhance gender and diversity mainstreaming. The fourth module on responsible research expands a bit on intersectional analysis and why it is important to have this approach in research and project development. And we also highlight practical ways to become more intersectional or more inclusive in our work. We demonstrate case studies and scenarios of people's mobility challenges. So here someone understands how important it is to see the complexity of the transport system. And we also take a look at gender and diversity disaggregated data, what this data is and why it is important to collect all these. Now, our fifth module is a module on employment, and one can find information there on how TInnGO approached the transport sector through case studies, through different surveys, and all the lessons that we've learned are presented there. We also present the barriers that women face in the transport sector, and one can learn about key points regarding women's careers in the transport sector as well, in the industry, in EU-funded projects, as well as in higher education, and what actually prevents women from engaging in the transport sector. We highlight best practices to boost women's participation in smart mobility areas, And we have also included recommendations to widen gender diversity in transport. The sixth module is the education module. So here we present initiatives from different stakeholders to promote gender balances in science, technology, engineering, and maths. So who funded these initiatives, what were the target groups, what were the actions. We also present good practices from project partner countries to draw women in STEM, such as different events, workshops, projects, etc. Statistics are also displayed regarding different levels and areas of education. And we have examined sectors like cybersecurity, the financial sector, and the transport sector, and we have transferred this knowledge to the academic part. The module concludes with recommendation to reduce gender and diversity gaps in education. Our next module is the evaluation methods module. So here we define evaluation and ways to evaluate smart mobility projects, and we explain the reasons we need evaluation. We introduce the logic model and take it to the context of gender smart mobility, and we also give practical examples for the readers to get familiar with gender smart indicators. Our last module is the module on Gender and Diversity Action Plan, the GADAP. So here we're expanding the strategy of a gender action plan, and we give a stronger focus on diversity as well. We introduce perspectives on gender and diversity in the field of transport and mobility. This module also includes the methodology of a GADAP and also practical examples of conducting a gender and diversity action plan. Now, these were all the modules, and let's move on to see some interactive examples from different modules. So, for example, here we've got what is known as inclusive language. So we've got examples of gender bias that we use in language. For example, if we say man or manhood, if someone clicks on that, how could we rephrase that? We could say people or human beings or humankind. What about businessmen? We could say business people or representatives, and we've got different words that could be rephrased. For example, chairman, layman, guys. So if we click on all these, we see the rephrase on the right. So this is one part of one module. Here, for example, we can see part of module 3. So we have different examples from European countries that have used tools and measures to promote gender equality and diversity. For example, we've got the yellow marked countries that one can click on. So if we click on Sweden, for example, we've got Gothenburg, we've got Malmö, what they did. Let's go to Gothenburg. So here we see a brief description on a tool for social impact analysis. If someone wants to delve deeper into this tool, one can click here, and so he or she is being transmitted to the directed actually to the guide. So this guide is downloadable, or we can go actually to Malmö to see what Malmö did, and how the Swedish government approached the whole gender equality area from 2011 to 2019. If we go back to the map, we see that now Sweden has become grey, and we can choose between all the other countries. Now, this one is another example. So we see different characteristics that apply to smart mobility. We've got all these bubbles here, and if we hover over all the bubbles, we get information on all these. So, for example, if we see marital status, we see how marital status influences the transport sector and mobility. If we go to occupation, we see how occupation impacts mobility, or gender identity, we see information on that. So we have like 22 options to choose from and see and get information on that. And the final slide is a scenario that we can find on module 4. So we've got the characteristics of a person and an imaginary scenario that could be real. And we're asking the reader to sit and to think which aspects of this person's identity might impede her mobility. So we've got the choices here. One can think and can actually click on it to see if these characteristics might impede the mobility. One gets the answers here and can get a deeper understanding on all this, the complexity of the transport system. So this has been my presentation.
Thanks a lot, Lazarus, and you were completely on time, I must say.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And this was actually the first time I saw the entire educational tool here. I think it's fascinating. I hope that the audience also think that. And next we will go to you, Vale, and please, the word is yours.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, that's fine.
Right. So thank you very much, Hilda, for the introduction. So I'll just talk briefly on the educational guidelines we worked on as part of work package 9 of the Diamond project. So obviously gender is an important consideration in the development of the curriculum and the design of them. Maybe it's not very obvious or very explicit at the moment, but I think we are towards this process. So the current transport system, for example, inadequately address gender differences in terms of the services and the service delivery of that, and the gender equity is not being realized. The findings from the Diamond project on that aspect suggested that women are in particularly concerned with a number of inadequacy in availability of the transportation modes, accessibility to these modes, safety, which is a very important aspect, awareness of them, they don't know they exist, and the cost. In relation to employability, women are concerned in specific with career development and flexible working opportunities. There's limited knowledge of gender differences in the transport sector by all stakeholders. Regarding the educational curriculum design guidelines, in order to fill in this knowledge gap, the Diamond project is developing curriculum design guidelines to provide a roadmap for adaptation for the adaptation. Sorry, something went wrong. For the adaptation of the findings of the project. The guidelines will be distributed amongst the European training and educational centers. Their key aim is to develop a new level of curriculum design guidelines to deliver excellence in terms of gender gap in the transport sector for educational institutions and sorry, can you see my screen?
No, now we see you. Yeah, we see your screen. That's fine.
Can you see the screen now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the guidelines will be distributed amongst the European training and educational centers. Their key aim is to develop a new level of curriculum design guidelines to deliver excellence in education and to close the gender gap in the transport sector for educational institutions and for future transport professionals. The novel educational content will address the following items. How technologies should adapt to women's needs. We've found out, we've seen over the past couple of 2.5 days that there is an issue about technologies and the adaptation of women to use the technologies and how most of the technologies are developed and prepared mainly with a man in mind. How to match job opportunities with women motivations, talents, and needs. Also, how to design job characteristics and disseminate to attract women. How to carry out HR processes to avoid bias and discrimination, and cover psychology aspects in the different stages of employment, including getting into education, workforce, job recruitments, retention, progression in jobs, etc. I mean, quite often we hear about all these factors and the aspects, and women, for example, even if they are similarly qualified for the job, there could be disadvantage for being married or for having children. If they have a sabbatical year to go like for childcare or something, when they get back, they will be like maybe not very sure, not very confident about getting back to the job, and they might need special training. They might also be a little bit behind in terms of promotion, etc. So all these aspects need to be identified and addressed, and appropriate measures to be put in place in order to minimize the negative impact of these issues. Quite often we hear about women, for example, gone for a year maternity and then came back not able to face the job and the requirements of the job, and ends up leaving her job. So these are the kind of things we ought to pay attention to, and look at what are the measures that could be put in place to avoid this situation. Future skills needed for job positions. It is very well known in engineering and sciences that the top jobs, for example, are mostly held by men, and maybe there are skills needed or specific training needed for women to be equal in getting and holding these jobs, or maintaining them, or the job specification could be looked at in terms of even those who prepare the job specifications. It should be designed with equality in mind. How to design transport services to meet women's requirements and expectations and improve their access to transportation and jobs, which is very important. The target beneficiaries of this educational curriculum design guidelines will be the EU universities, training centers offering undergraduate and postgraduate studies, in-company and occupational training on transport technologies and management. The expected outcome of the guidelines is an increased readiness of transport system and educational courses for gender inclusion based on a better understanding of women's needs and challenges. I think at the end, I'll just say that I think we are on the right track. Maybe things are happening a little bit slowly or not as fast as you would like to be or to see. But I think it is good that there is a much more awareness at the moment of the gender inequalities and the need for this. Quite often we find that like some jobs specifically appoint women just to tick the boxes, and that in itself is a recognition of the need of having an equal system prepared beforehand and during the process to appoint to have equal opportunities in place. So I think we are on the right track. Things happening a little bit slow, but it's like the churn when you're making cheese from the milk. Things happen slowly, but slow and sure, as we say. So hopefully we will progress in that direction. And I think if there's any more time left in my time allocation, I would be happy to get in a discussion or answer any questions you have. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for two very inspiring and also quite optimistic here in your talk, Wafa, about the future possibilities. implementing some of the ideas from the two projects. We have heard about two, I think, different projects, because the TInnGO educational tool is aimed at a kind of open online public. You don't know who the students will be, so to speak. And Vafa, you have guided the Diamond guidelines are more addressing institutional settings, curriculum development, and HR developments. And I don't know whether I could take the liberty now of opening the floor for 5 minutes discussion, because I see the two last papers we have here. They are a bit different. They have a different perspective. So if there are any immediate questions to the two presentations we have had here, I would like to welcome them. Could I ask you two then, as participants here, do you have any comments on each other's, on the TInnGO and the DIAMOND guidelines? Do you have any thoughts or comments on the presentation?
I have a question for Lazarus, if I may.
Yes, of course.
Please.
Well, thank you very much. I found your presentations very interesting. Could you just elaborate a bit on how did you use a logic model in that context? What data you used, and what did you do about?
Yeah, well, to be honest, this is currently being examined once more, the logic model. So I'm not very aware of this on this part.
Right. Yeah, but what was prediction? What were you predicting, just in general, without getting into the details of that?
Excuse me, can you again say that, because I didn't understand you?
What were you, in the logic model, you use it to make a prediction? Yeah. Well, what are the probabilities of? So was it you're feeding the model with the data you collected, for example, and then to predict the future scenarios, for example? Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get some inputs and some outputs and some outcomes.
Yeah. And why the logic model? Because I thought there might be some correlation between the options here. That's why I'm asking, because the logic model is not the best model to use when you suspect a correlation between the options available. And I thought there might be some correlation there. So I just wondered why the logic model, or was it just testing, for example, as well as other models?
This was actually proposed by all the hubs. So because the material was co-developed, the experts in this part did propose to work on the logic model. So I think there are experts that know the whole process inside out on this model.
Okay,
I'm not an expert on how this works and the details.
We can discuss that later, of course. Yeah, but it's very interesting. Yeah.
I have been involved in many of the chapters of the educational model, or material, but not on this logic thing. So I will keep outside. But I would like to ask you, Vafa, how do you plan to distribute the guidelines? I mean, you have worked up these guidelines. How do you plan to approach these institutions, etc., etc.?
Yeah, so as I said, I mean, the idea is to make these guidelines and recommendations available for the EU universities through, for example, dissemination activities, events, such like this one, and also via other conferences with other, like even in other projects where we're not involved in, but we can contribute to them. Also, publications. Obviously, when we make publications, that is a means of dissemination. Also, once we have something reasonable, I think the gender inequality is a very like growing up subject, and there's a very hot topic on the political and social agenda. So I think once you have some good recommendations in that direction, it will be looked at and quickly and acquired. So hopefully, as I said, it will be not a very fast process, but hopefully we will get there. It's like the churn, you know, when we make the cheese, you keep like at it. So you have to be patient and keeping at it to do full dissemination.
Yeah.
Hilda, you are a quarter of an hour behind schedule. Do you know this?
We will close this debate now and go on. And thank you so much to both of you. And I will ask the next two speakers to link.
Sinead.
And
That's me.
Sinead from the TInnGO project, who is going to talk about citizen science. Citizen science. And I will take the opportunity also to include you now, a presentation of you, Andrea. You are going to talk about co-design for empathy and reducing barriers to inclusion. I can see from the program that you have 20 minutes each for your talks, which I so you I think we have
So I won't need that, and also the title of my talk is still wrong, but we'll address that when we get onto it.
But then we will catch up on the time, I guess, if you have planned for 10 minutes. Now I need to find my papers again. And we have Sinead here, Quillan from Coventry University, and you have been part of the TInnGO project. And she specializes in citizen engagement in research and innovation. She established Coventry City as a test bed or living lab in 2010, and then founded the Fab Lab Coventry in 2016. Using living lab approaches and methodologies to set up and operate what is essentially a STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math civic engagement program resourced by a world-renowned social science research center, the Center for Trust, Peace, and Social Relation. And the interest of Sinead is circular economy, citizen science, and individual and urban vulnerabilities. So please go ahead, Sinead, and then I'll return back to an introduction of you, Andrea.
Thank you, Hilda. I'm just having a little problem sharing my screen, so I'm going to try again.
Your screen is fine.
Can you see the slides?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
Everything is under control.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, it's difficult because I can't see them myself. Thank you for inviting me to speak about our citizen science approaches within TInnGO. I will also try to save you some time. Today I want to talk about citizen science and citizen engagement within TInnGO. And I also want to talk about the underpinning participation theory that we use to inform how we designed the approaches. I then want to look at the use of citizen science within TInnGO and talk about the future direction for this work and the train the trainer materials that we have developed. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So fortuitously, in the Times Higher Education newspaper this morning, there is actually an article entitled "Citizen Science Takes Off Post-Pandemic." And so I think that's great because it just shows how topical this methodology is and how it's becoming more prevalent within the research environment. In the article, they ask, can amateur scientists really make a big difference in research? And in the article, they talk about engaging citizens in research helps to save costs and increase capacity. Well, that's fine, but I argue that we also support the citizens to gain a lot back as well in terms of qualifications, skills, improving their CV, and in the best case scenario, paid employment as a citizen researcher. So the article then finalises saying that citizen science has exploded within all sectors in the US, but we're also seeing this within Europe, and with Horizon Europe in particular. There are numerous calls that require that citizen science methodologies are implemented, in particular and probably most prominently and dominantly within the Green Deal programme. If we could go to the next slide, please. So
excuse me for interrupting you, but we are not seeing your slides moving.
I thought not. I can't see them.
Can you change your slides from your computer?
To have another invitation of my screen.
Yeah, you are
yes,
sharing.
They are. It's me, I'm doing something wrong. I'm sorry, I got this correct in the rehearsal.
With the, you can move them with the arrows.
I'm getting. Okay, can you see now?
No.
No.
Is this working now?
Now we are there.
Yes,
Now
yeah, that's good.
Thank you.
Okay, please accept my sincere apologies, and I'll go as fast as I can now. Oh gosh, it's gone again. Okay, so the background to the... Can you see the slides?
Yeah.
We're now looking at the TInnGO Hubs, TInnGO Labs slide.
Perfect. So we used the Living Labs approach to engaging citizens and stakeholders in the TInnGO Labs within the hubs in 10 countries. And if you're not familiar with the Living Lab approach, there are 5 key elements: active user citizen engagement, real life settings, multiple stakeholder participation, co-creation, and hundreds of different methodologies that can be used. Within TInnGO, we focused on 3 main methodologies. So you will have already heard Paul McGee talk about the design provocation methodology. The citizen social science methodology was really impacted by COVID, and so we didn't get to that final level that we wanted to, but what we have done is develop materials for others to learn from and for us to continue to use afterwards. But all of the 10 hubs managed to engage citizens in a wonderful variety of ways, and I'll talk about that in a bit more detail. Okay, so just to explain a bit more about the TInnGO specific approach, TInnGO aimed to ensure that future transport and mobility, education, policy, services and products take into account and reflect the needs of all members of society. So within TInnGO, we thought that citizen engagement and citizen social science was a fantastic way that we could achieve this, because it helps us to view transport through the lens of wider societal issues. In TInnGO, we plan to gain insight into communities through citizen engagement and the trained citizen social scientists who could conduct research of relevance to TInnGO, but also of relevance to their own lived experience and communities. So the article in today's Times Higher talks very much about the benefit to the research environment, but here we felt that citizens can also benefit. They can input into their local transport policy and practice whilst they themselves are learning new skills, gaining qualifications, and once trained, they then represent a capacity within the local transport policy decision-making arena that can be used to support future work. I'll talk a little bit now about the underpinning theory of the citizen engagement within TInnGO. And so you have 3 main authors that talk about power relations and empowering citizens, and you have Arnstein, Hart and Pretty, and there are various layers, or as they refer to them, ladders of participation, and they go from 1 to 7. And you can see at the bottom they're talking very much about non-participation, so this might be where you get cohorts of citizens in a room and you provide them with information. And then as you move up through the layers or ladders, then you're seeing tokenism. And this might include participation in demonstrating a particular mobility product or service. And towards the higher levels, 5 to 7, this is where you're seeing citizen power. So this is where at the very highest level, citizens are actually co-investigators in the research with you. So you probably look at that and think, oh, we definitely want to aim for the citizen power side. Within TInnGO, we don't think so actually. And we feel that you can go beyond Arnstein's ladder towards more of a mosaic of participation. And in TInnGO, we felt that what was the most important is that we had various tools, approaches and mechanisms for citizens to engage at all levels, and that all levels are actually valuable because you are getting that citizen and stakeholder point of view. So for us, it's not just about citizen empowerment, it's more about how within TInnGO and within the hubs, we could create this mosaic with multiple connections and tools and infrastructure that all helps improve the dialogue between citizens and local transport providers and policymakers. So we didn't achieve the level 4 to the extent we had hoped because of COVID, but still the 10 hubs were able to achieve a huge amount and actually had to become more creative and try new methodologies as a result. So we had levels 1 to 4 in terms of how engaged citizens and stakeholders could be. And remember, when I mentioned the ladders of participation, those highest levels are really expensive and really resource intensive. And so level 1 is fairly low level in terms of resources, and for us that's where we involve the hubs in communicating with their citizens and stakeholders and translating those challenges back to, in this instance, the TInnGO design team. If we wanted to take that a step further, then you go to level 2, where the concept designs are co-created with the hubs. They were then uploaded onto the TInnGO Open Innovation platform, and on that platform individuals and stakeholders can continue to engage with those designs. In level 3, this is where you see the hubs are actively engaging citizen scientists and stakeholders in co-creating new mobility solutions, but also in coming up with new and varied ways of getting stakeholders' input. Level 4 is the optimum, and we will continue this beyond TInnGO, and this is where we have created a citizen social science training programme with a digital badge, and we have also created a train the trainer programme so that other organisations could implement this as a methodology if they wish. To bring it to life, this is an example of how we implemented level 1. So remember, we were in lockdown, we were all really gutted that we couldn't implement all the exciting plans to engage citizens, but we found a way around it. We used Mural, an online whiteboard, as a tool to bring to life some of the challenges that each of the hub citizens and stakeholders were facing, and then we were able to interact with those challenges and come up with some design ideas and provocations, as you can see there. At level 2 is where we go a step further, and here is the TInnGO website with the Open Innovation Platform ideas section, and this is where you see all of the design provocations, and this is where individuals and stakeholders can engage with those design provocations and potential solutions. At level 3, you can see in Paris, for example, where they worked with L'Oréal and an NGO to engage citizens in a dialogue about anxiety and fears on the Paris metro. And then in the bottom right-hand corner is an example of exploratory walks which have been implemented in Paris and will be implemented in Coventry this week, because following COVID, we finally got ethical approval. But this is where you're engaging citizens in being interviewed in a very informal way, perhaps taking photos and talking about the infrastructure around them and the mobility solutions that they're encountering on the way. Finally, to finish up, I'm going to talk to you about level 4, which we achieved to a lesser degree than we had planned, but we're hoping this will continue beyond the project. So in TInnGO, we wanted to look at citizen social science because TInnGO wanted to include all parts of society, and so for us, we were very interested in individuals' lived experience. So you can have citizen science in terms of mass data collection, an example of which is the Christmas bird count every year. But here we are interested in citizen social science, also known by many other names: community, participatory action research, or peer research. Our training is underpinned by the 10 principles of citizen science, which you can find on the European Citizen Science Association, and that is very much about a win-win both for the researcher and for the citizen scientists, ensuring that appropriate methodology is used, that no one feels alienated, and that most importantly, the information coming from the citizen is fed back to them and is used more widely. So why do we need citizen science? And there is a lot of criticism of citizen science, as the article at the beginning talked about. Well, we have an imperfect society, we don't know enough. Academic, expert or traditional research isn't enough. The people closest to community issues are the best place to investigate them, and access can be an issue for researchers. More research, different research can only lead to better understanding, and if you bring more people into researching social issues, then you have more people that are able and willing to change them. So our view when we were developing the materials is that research is fantastic, but we need lots everywhere. Social scientists are amazing, but sometimes they can overcomplicate things. And an example that we use in our training is the use of terminology such as ontology and epistemology. But citizen social science can overcome some of these barriers and can make research more accessible, in particular to stakeholders and policymakers. So finally, I'm just going to give you a bit of an overview of the lesson plans and assessment criteria for the training. So the training is about supporting citizens to gain the skills they need to understand what citizen social science is, to understand different types of research methods that can be applied, to understand ethical and data management issues, to be able to design their own peer research project, to then be able to carry out that project, and then to be able to feed back their results in a meaningful way. When we train citizen social scientists, we expect them to undertake all of the learning, and I can see I've lost my screen. The training is available and it's on the TInnGO website if anybody would be interested. I'm not going anywhere as well, so if anyone is interested to learn a bit more, please do contact me, and I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Sinead, for very fine and also keeping to the time. Thank you. And we will go on with, or I will give the word to Andrea Woodcock now from Coventry University. And you have seen, I think most of us have seen you several times, Andrea. But Andrea is a professor at the Faculty of Arts and Humanities at Coventry University and has been an active partner in several European Union projects for the last 20 years or so. And more lately, you have been coordinating the three, I think the TInnGO project is the third project you are coordinating, which is really impressive. And you recently completed awards include, you have got, include the UK Global Network funded project. That's a new project, I guess, looking at gender transport priority in LME. You have to explain that. I mean, you use all these abbreviations, but anyway, welcome, Andrea. Looking forward to hear your talk on co-design for empathy and reducing barriers for inclusion. Is it the correct title?
No, of course it isn't.
Oh, okay.
So don't worry. I don't think you can see my screen, so I don't know what's happening here because it worked yesterday.
We can see it.
No, you can see me.
No, we can see the screen.
Can you? Oh, okay. Oh, this is very odd, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Yeah, here we are.
Right, let's hope then that this goes forward. Yeah, I'm not quite sure what's happening. I must apologise to our audience. Things seem to not work the same today as they did yesterday. So thank you. You do know me. I'm the PI of the TInnGO project, and I work at Coventry University in the UK. This follows on very nicely from Sinead's talk and also from the talk Paul McGee gave yesterday. And the title is Opportunities Provided by Design for Meaningful Engagement with Diverse Groups, the Role of Design Provocations. So we're back in the field of design. And what I'd like to do in this very brief talk, and it will be very brief, I wish I could see my slides, is thinking about how design thinking can provoke awareness of the issues of diverse users of transport systems. So the presentation draws on the experience of the TInnGO team in the UK and the students that they worked with on developing over 50 design provocations and 100 pre-concept designs to stimulate discussion on how to create gender and diverse smart mobility. Oh, sorry. This is very strange, isn't it? Right. Sorry. As you can see from this screen, we can see some of the design provocations that have been developed by some of our student designers. And we worked with undergraduate design interns who joined us on a placement with the promise that they would be able to travel around Europe visiting the TInnGO ID labs. Obviously, this didn't happen within the lifetime of the project, and they weren't even in Coventry. So they were in Spain, Malaysia, India as well. So we were co-located from them as well. And Paul has talked about the value that the designers have experienced through working with us on the project. And this is really important because we're trying to train designers of the future. These are the people who will be designing the vehicles that are on our roads. If they don't understand the needs for gender and diversity smart mobility, we're going to be unstuck. So getting them to have empathic awareness is key. Getting them to not be afraid of talking to users or trying to dig a little bit deeper is key to this as well. We're all designers. So this was a concept that we needed to put across to our TInnGO team, who a lot of them are engineers and social scientists, but we all have we are all designers in some way. We can all empathize, we can always all have ideas. Maybe they're not, we can't visualize these properly, but we can all start to talk about them, define what we mean, ideate, prototype and test things. So we're all part of this circle. And just because some designers have design training doesn't mean to say that we don't have ideas and worthwhile ideas. In my opening talk, I discussed gender transport poverty as being a wicked problem, one that's difficult or impossible to solve because of incomplete, contradictory and changing requirements that are often difficult to recognise. And design thinking is a way of tackling these wicked problems. I know designers may find it hard to do this, but once they get the idea that things are related to each other, they get the idea that they need to empathize, they can start to work on more appropriate solutions and address the wicked problems that we have. And transport doesn't stand alone. We have to think about it in terms of intersectionality and the effect that any transport system will have on any person using it, but also on the wider issues as well that might come to bear when designing transport. So I've been talking about design provocation, and if you've had the opportunity to look at the Open Innovation platform, you will see the design provocations that we've put up there. So we've coined the term design provocation. It's a visual design response to a comment, design brief, or idea. It can be a sketch, it can be a storyboard, it can be a more formal and well articulated design response, but it isn't the final version of what we want to design. It's a visual exploration of an idea, of a concept, or maybe of a problem. And because it's a visual early exploration, it may show where the designers or people haven't actually articulated their problem properly. So it's a way of exploring and engaging people in deeper conversations. So it's a less than perfect solution. And if you go on the Open Innovation platform, it may raise a tension within you. You may think, that's not right. Well, that doesn't fit in with my situation. And that's what we want to do. We want to find new ways of opening debate with people. So tension causes consternation, surprise. It may even cause some delight, but it can be resolved through engagement. And in this case, the engagement leads to new knowledge, understanding, and reframing of the question. And engagement in this case is mediated by and through design, rather than other methods such as surveys. Surveys are great, collecting data is great, but it doesn't give you great insights into the lived experience. And it is that we need to get on board. We need to understand what it's like to be isolated, what it's like to be stuck on a platform, not being able to find a way out, find a way onto the level surface. You're stuck underground. How do you get out if you're in a wheelchair and you only have steps and lifts that don't work? What does that actually mean? And if people can understand what that means for somebody, then they might start to design for it. So this is what we should have done. So our methodology pre-COVID and through this process is we were supposed to work in all our hubs face with end users from the vulnerable and excluded communities. Here we can see examples of when we did invite older people into the design studio to co-design with our students. And here we have an exchange of designs, ideas, models, prototypes, sketches, and engagement, talking, conversations with the older people through those designs. And here both groups benefited. So the students benefited by getting first-hand feedback on what they were doing, by understanding more about the situation of the older people and what they liked and disliked. But the older people themselves felt someone was taking notice and they could get their views across in ways that they hadn't done before. And we expected to replicate this approach in all of the hubs throughout the project. Unfortunately, along came COVID, and this coincided right when we were going to do this work. So instead of going out to the hubs and the hubs going out to the community, the hubs provided design ideas or problems, and they put these forward on the Open Innovation platform or maybe using Teams. No, Mural, as Sinead has commented already. These were discussed with our design manager, Paul McGee, and some of the briefs were assigned to the student interns. From this, we had critical design reviews over Teams every week with the designers. The design provocations are the final, represent the stage to which the designers had reached after maybe a month working on the project. So they're included with a short text describing what they're about. These are then shared with the community on the Open Innovation platform as a discussion platform to generate new insights and design outcomes. And here the discussion and entries are mediated through a visual entity, not through a survey. And I think this is really important, and it's something we wanted to explore. So this is the URL for our Open Innovation platform. We are supporting this for several years after the lifetime of the project, so please feel free to contribute to it. It's an open platform for co-creating solutions to mobility problems, and here you can see some of the scooter designs. These were generated when there was the e-scooter trial in Coventry, so they were very much of a time and of a place. So as a positive engagement tool, feedback is non-confrontational and intentionally constructive. Discussion is asynchronous, so it's not an immediate reaction. You can have time to think about it and reflect with others on it. The provocation is the basis for the design discussion, nothing more. I can't actually see the text on any of these. So we're trying to set up a think tank here that could engage people. Unfortunately, it is all mediated through an online platform. This wasn't what we intended. We intended to have material that each of the hubs could put around their walls to invite people to have conversations. So we realized that we're not getting to the people that we need to talk to through these designs. You have to be internet literate, you have to have access to a computer, you have to have spare time. So this isn't quite how we intended to run this. Also, it's anonymous, it's private, and it's secure, and it means that you don't have to insert any of your personal details on this. So to reiterate why this is important, local authorities, operators have long-standing issues in engaging with end users in meaningful ways. This is really sad from my perspective as an ergonomist and social scientist. Oh, sorry, I can't. Because we've been saying the same thing for at least 20 years, and it doesn't seem that much progress has been made. Users need to be involved in discussions about issues which affect their lives, and this is a point that was raised by Eleanor Lisney yesterday. We need to understand and appreciate the lived experience, and some of this is out of the realm of our understanding, and we need to do something with this. We're also looking at raising capacity building within the local community as well, to make them design literate, to make them citizen scientists, and this is very key as well, so that their views will be listened to. There's a lot of town hall meetings, focus groups, discussion meetings, and yeah, it generates a lot of excitement, a lot of good ideas, but it doesn't go any further because it's all anecdotal. We need to move forward on this. So in terms of the bigger picture, we're trying to create a paradigm shift where we move from community-oriented and informed to community-based, consulted and involved, towards collaboration, and finally empowerment. And hopefully what we've done is enable this to happen in a very small way. And we're trying to say that design research methods could be used to overcome some of the current barriers to engagement. In terms of conclusions, new mobility solutions should address the needs of all citizens, but these are still not known and they may not be discoverable by surveys. No design acts in isolation. It needs to think about the wider systems in which it's going to operate. Transport planning requires tools addressing the knowledge of different actors, social groups, transport modes, technologies, organisations and authorities, and a communication gap still exists between planners, operators, local authorities and users. One way to address these issues is through a participatory, co-creative platform where citizens can share knowledge on their lived experience. And we hope that we have provided some ways forward on this. I'm sorry, my end slide is missing here, but if you go back to the TInnGO Observatory webpage and the Open Innovation Platform and Photos repository, you'll try and see ways, you will see ways in which we're trying to address this. Thank you very much. Hilda, I finished.
Yeah, I'm there.
Yeah.
I don't know what happens here. No. Thank you so much, Andrea. And now I would like to call both Sinead and Andrea to have you on the screen. I think that these presentations also demonstrated the wide scope of the TInnGO project, and that we have addressed also not only policy guidelines, but also, I mean, designs in a very literal way. So I have one question here in the chat. It's a question, I think, for Andrea. Yeah. And I read it on empathic designers. How can we ensure that the designs are explorative or whatever, curious enough? As discussed in feminist literature, there is a difference on representing on behalf of a group or as part of a group, diverse social categories, And how can we combine CNITE's reflections on citizen science with empathic designers, ensuring that we actually are revealing or explorative enough in creating, in exploring social groups, transport problems. So I see the question kind of how do you create a genuine explorative process?
I'll have a go at some of this. We have looked at how we can train designers to be more empathic, and there is a 4-stage process to this. And once they've crossed a threshold of understanding, then they learn how to be empathic, but they have to have a willingness to engage in the first place. And a lot of designers don't have that willingness in the first place. A lot of people don't have that willingness, and they're afraid. So there is that. Where was I going with this? I've forgotten where I was going now. Okay. We can provide designers with the tools. We can try and take away the fear that they have. We can try and train them so that they are able to communicate in an easier, more friendly, less challenging way with end users, with the citizens. So there's part of that. And then what we'd want to do is co-create with our end users, and this has been a real challenge within the project because we've not had this ability to sit around a table with our citizens and design and sketch things and immediately form a bond with them. We've had to do this through the Open Innovation Platform, and it has not been a very good way of doing this, I must admit that. But being able to see and co-create is the key, and then you get validation of what you're doing as well. Sinead, would you like to come in on that? Can't hear you, Sinead. Turn on your mic.
2021 problem, apologies. I was just thinking, before COVID, Andrea, when we did have the 12 elder ladies in with the 30 design students, what was fantastic about that is those students might not normally socialise with an elder lady living on her own in a wheelchair. And they got to spend 4 quite in-depth sessions with those individuals, designing, sketching, having a Dragon's Den style panel at the end. And for me, in that room, I saw the student designers just change over the process. And so I think for me, with the citizen participation background, if you don't know a community, you don't understand how they live their lives. So the more opportunities we can create for designers to interact with different parts of different communities, then the better they'll be able to understand how those individuals live their lives. I also think that with citizen science, we can not just focus on the designer and their training and skills, we can also support the citizens to learn new skills so that they can contribute over and above providing their lived experience.
Yeah, I don't have any more questions here. But could I ask you a question from my own experience and where I see a barrier also as a researcher, coming from the research side. We have had several good ideas here also in the Copenhagen and Scandinavian hub about developing, a child seat for shared bikes, etc., etc. But the problem has really been to get in contact with designers or developers who could work up a model of these ideas. Because as a university people based in a basically dry university, not a technical university, it's a barrier sometimes to come to make the contact with these communities, and you might have better opportunities because you are in a design department. But could you say something about it? Because one thing is the thoughts and they are put down on a piece of paper, but then from there to materialize the model, how do you do it?
I think that's one for Paul. I don't know if Paul's a member of the audience on this one, but there is a process. I mean, Sinead's group can do some 3D printing and rapid fabrication, but we need to have working prototypes. We need to develop those prototypes, and at Coventry we do have the ability to make those. But then once you've got proof of concept, you're going to have to get a manufacturer on board, and that requires funding, I'm afraid. But I think the whole value of what we've been trying to do in terms of design is just using it as a communication tool. So, you know, there's big design departments everywhere, which have more skill than our students. But trying to get people engaged through design and talking about things in a non-confrontational manner, talking about their life experiences is really key. And if we could have shared that more widely amongst the whole TInnGO team, then there would have been a lot of value for each of the hubs, and they could have gone forward and worked more in this. COVID's been a real problem for this, I'm afraid.
Yeah. But you have produced many exciting ideas, I think, and I mean, I'm sure that they will invigorate the whole area.
Well, I'd hope so, and we don't want it to stop there. So we are committed to carrying on with the platform and moving it forward. It can act as inspiration for the next set of designers. So we're always already talking to more undergraduate designers, but everyone is free to put forward their ideas. I think there is too much lack of sharing amongst the community. I think that people are afraid, especially within design. If they get a good idea, then they're afraid that someone's going to steal it and profit from it. That's really not where we're at in terms of co-creation. Sinead, would you like to say anything about this, because you work a lot with the community? Is there a reticence of people to put forward their ideas?
Probably no, I find the opposite. So I had a makerspace in a city centre, and we would have engineers from Jaguar come in and mock up prototypes in our messy makerspace because they're too nervous to do so within their work environment. Or we managed to get people who are just interested. They might do a mock-up in cardboard, but they're just interested to see where it might go. So I think at the stages we engage with people, which is that very low-level prototyping, we don't see that. But there is that mismatch then between how do you support them to link with a more established manufacturer, or how do you support them to access local and regional funding to take their prototypes to the next phase.
Yeah, and here gender might enter the picture again, because we know that it's much harder to become a women entrepreneur or an entrepreneur in the field that we are talking about, and for women than it is for men. I mean, access to finance and investment, etc., etc.
Yeah, that's certainly been the case. We found that in the entrepreneurship material, but also you've provided very good examples, Hilda, of successful women who have led the way into the smart mobility field. So it is possible, but you need a lot of strength and a good pinch of luck maybe on that.
So please take a look at these reports also. In addition to the smart cars, there was this report on various entrepreneurs worked up by Stine, who is also in the audience today. Yeah. I think the session here, are there any more questions, or do you want to add more to the discussion, Andrea and Sinead? Because otherwise I think I will close the session and thank all of you for very inspiring presentations. I think that the session here, the entire session, has also been approved to the impact, both the substantial impact, but also the potential impact of the two projects. So I think it has been a great session to be sharing, and yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Hilda. Thank you.